All right, all right. We are going to get started here in just a second. Want to give everybody just a moment or two to get on the call here on the talk, and then we're going to dive in. A lot of good stuff to cover today. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So welcome to this final part of this 3-part series, Embrace the Power of Boundaries. And today I'm going to be talking about communicating boundaries within your relationships. And when I'm saying relationships throughout this entire talk, I'm not just talking about like your romantic relationship, your husband, wife, girlfriend, boyfriend. I'm talking about any relationship that you have with any other humans in your life that you're interacting with on a somewhat regular basis. So that could be your friends, other family members, coworkers, your boss. It could be your neighbors, people at various social functions. So it doesn't really matter. Anybody that you have in your life there that you interact with on a regular basis may be an opportunity for where you need to establish some boundaries. So thank you for being here. If you are watching the replay, thank you so much for watching the replay. And if you are here live with me, then do me a favor, drop a little comment and let me know so I can say hi. But I am super excited to host this 3-part series because I know boundaries is something that most people struggle with. And I know for a fact that most introverts struggle with this. Since I coach introverts exclusively, I know this is a challenge for most of my clients. And I think just in general, it's a challenge for a lot of introverts. In fact, I spoke to that in the first part of this series about why that is. But I also know that when you learn how to establish really strong boundaries in your life where they're needed, this is a key piece of not only protecting your well-being and ensuring that you are heard, seen, respected, and all of that, but it's a key part of growing your confidence and stepping into your own power. So it's a really big thing that's really important for us to understand how to do. So if this is your first time on one of my talks, let me take just a moment to introduce myself. I'm Vicki Regina. I am a certified mindset and confidence coach for introverts, and I've been coaching for about 7 years. So I have spent hundreds of hours working with my introverted clients to really help them to understand what it actually means to be an introvert so that they can step into their natural strengths and gifts and use that as the vehicle for helping them to confidently step out of their comfort zone, put themselves out there, both of those in ways that are aligned to their skills and to their nature. And also to, when they do that, this is really how they start to thrive on their own terms. And the reason that I focus exclusively on introverts is one, I'm a hardcore introvert myself. So I understand the challenges and the struggles that come with living in this, what feels like a very extrovert dominant world, right? So I understand those challenges. And I feel very strongly about this. I don't believe that introversion is something that we need to overcome or fix, mainly because we are biologically wired this way. So we can't overcome it or fix it. And so if you believe that this is something that you need to overcome or fix, then it's not your introversion that you need to fix. It is just your thoughts and your beliefs and your understanding about what you think introversion is. That's the only piece. And that's a lot easier to fix. Can be still feel a little challenging, but that's something that we can fix. Again, you don't need to fix who you are as an introvert. So if you've missed the past 2 parts of this series, let me take a moment just to really quickly recap what I covered. So in the first part of this series, I talked about what boundaries are, in case you're new to that, and why they're essential why it's essential for us to set boundaries in our life. I talked about how boundaries contribute and really help to establish healthy relationships. I talked about why introverts in particular may struggle with setting boundaries. And if that's you, I shared a few tips and strategies to help you to start overcoming those challenges so that you can start to implement boundaries in your relationships. And then in part 2, I actually got into some of the specific boundaries that you might want to implement as an introvert. So boundaries around your personal space and alone time, around your emotional well-being. And then I also talked about specific boundaries around social interactions and events. So today I'm going to carry this conversation forward, and I'm going to be talking about, how to actually start communicating boundaries within your relationship. So I'm going to be talking about why effective communication is crucial for setting boundaries. And I'm going to talk about, or I'm going to share a couple of tips for how you can start to build your confidence and your assertiveness for when you are going into that conversation and having and sharing with somebody what your boundaries and your needs are. And then I'm going to share with you the 4 steps that you can take to actually prepare and have the conversation with someone around setting and establishing boundaries. And then I'll share a little bit about what you can do afterwards to really take care of yourself. So if you have any questions as we're going through this, please feel free to drop those in the comments. If I don't see it right away, I'll keep an eye on it. If I don't see it right away, not to worry, I will definitely answer any questions that come in before we wrap up today's talk. So with that in mind, let's dive in and get started. So I want to start by talking about why effective communication is crucial when it comes to setting boundaries. And I feel like, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but I feel like the 2 key reasons that I want to touch on here tonight is one, it facilitates clarity and understanding within relationships. And 2, it fuels your empowerment and your self-respect. So you can actually look at this as almost like a 360-degree perspective. So facilitating clarity and understanding within relationships is that outer result from setting boundaries, and the fueling your empowerment and self-respect is the inner result of stepping up for yourself and setting boundaries. So it's a beautiful inside and outside process for strengthening not only your relationships with others, but also strengthening your relationship with yourself. So if we take a look at that first reason, clarity and understanding, and take a look at that a little bit more deeply, again, effective communication it just plays a crucial role in being able to set boundaries. So when you are effectively communicating your boundaries within a relationship, and again, any sort of relationship that you have with people in your life, this is going to allow for there to be clarity between you and this other person. And when you can clearly communicate your boundaries, what you're actually doing is you are specifying the guidelines of what you feel is acceptable for you or not acceptable for you in terms of what happens around you, what is said to you, not said to you, how you're treated, how you're not treated, and a whole host of other things. And so this is really important because when you're able to have these clear and open conversations and express what your needs are, you're laying the foundation to prevent misunderstandings and conflicts. Because when you're expressing these boundaries, you're making it very clear, what your expectations and limits are. And this is what really helps you to create healthy environments for stronger relationships to thrive. Now, when we look at the empowerment and self-respect piece, so that inner piece, the inner result from setting boundaries, when you are setting boundaries with people, that's a huge step for self-empowerment because you're taking the time to look at what your needs are, you're valuing what your needs are, and then you're tapping into your courage to be able to step up and express that to other people in your lives. So it's a huge act of self-empowerment and self-respect, and it really plays a big role in reinforcing your own self-worth to yourself because essentially what you're doing is you're being an advocate for yourself. So this is going to help you to protect your mental, your emotional, and your physical well-being, as well as your energetic well-being, which is really key for introverts because our energy and managing our energy is such a key thing for us. So again, when you are effectively communicating boundaries to other people in your life, you are essentially cultivating this stronger sense of self, and that is going to boost your overall self-esteem and self-confidence. So now that we are clear on why effective communication is crucial for setting boundaries, let's take a moment to look at a couple of tips for how you can start to work on your confidence and assertiveness so that you are walking into those conversations feeling more confident and assertive. Because I know this is an area that a lot of people struggle with if you've never really practiced talking about boundaries and sharing boundaries with people in your life. It can feel uncomfortable and a little scary. So when it comes to building your confidence and your assertiveness, again, there's a number of things that I work on my clients with around this area, but 2 key things that I want to point out here today is that you need to understand your strengths as an introvert, and you need to take some time to prepare and plan for the conversations. So when it comes to understanding your strengths, this is key. If you don't understand your strengths as an introvert, if you think that you're at a disadvantage, or if you think that your needs for, spending time alone or whatever it is something that is selfish, or you're being mean to people and you're dismissing your needs, and you're not recognizing that by having some of those things is what really allows you to lean into your strengths. If you don't see that, it's going to be very, very hard for you to feel confident in having these conversations and advocating for yourself. So it's really important that you understand why you are the way you are. Understand that this isn't something that you need to change, have to change, or can change, and that there are so many strengths that come with being an introvert. And when you understand that, you're going to be able to stand up for yourself and advocate for yourself much more easily and much more confidently. So really quickly, to touch on a couple of strengths that introverts have that tie into this process of communicating boundaries. Introverts are really good at being thoughtfulness. Introverts are excellent at deep thinking and reflective thinking. Introverts are when they're in conversations with people, they're very attentive. They're very attentive on the other person. We're great listeners, so we're able to hear things that, maybe people aren't necessarily saying because we're really focused on them. And we're really good problem solvers. We have great analytical skills. So these are things that you may not necessarily recognize in yourself, but if you can, and you can lean into them, you can leverage those skills to have these conversations and to speak up for yourself and to do so confidently. Now, when it comes to preparation and planning, this is really key because introverts thrive on being prepared. We're not the best at having to think on our feet, especially when it's a highly emotional situation or conversation. So the more that you can prepare ahead of time, the better you're going to feel when you walk into the conversation. So this is something that you can think through. Obviously the boundaries that you're going to want to talk about, but you can think about how you're going to want to express these. The words that you're going to say. You want to be prepared with understanding what your needs and limits are. You want to think through and prepare some potential scenarios in advance. So that might be the scenarios that exhibit why you want the boundaries and need the boundaries that you're talking about. Some examples. You might want to think through potential scenarios with actually having the conversation. So it could be, obviously if you're setting boundaries with someone, it's someone that you know. So you might be able to anticipate some questions or concerns that they may have, so that you can prepare the counterpoints to support your needs and your boundaries. So the more that you can prepare ahead of time, then the better you're going to feel walking into those conversations. Because ultimately, again, what we're doing here is by having a clear understanding of what you want to communicate and why this is important to you, why these boundaries are important to you, that is going to help you to navigate these boundary setting conversations with a lot more ease, with a lot more confidence, and with a lot more assertiveness. All right, so now that we are clear on why effective boundaries are crucial for setting our effective communication is crucial for setting boundaries, and we have talked through a few tips for how to start to work on your confidence and assertiveness, let's now actually go through what you need to do to really fully prepare to communicate your boundaries. So when it comes to communicating your boundaries, I like to go through 4 steps with folks to help them prepare for having these conversations. Now, some of these we've already talked about, but the 4 steps for confidently being able to communicate your boundaries is number 1, self-reflection. The second step is to prepare for the conversation. So we just kind of talked about that a little bit. The third step is to actually have the conversation, so communicating your boundaries. And then the fourth step is to set consequences, to at least be prepared for that. So let's go through those individually so you have a little bit more understanding of what that looks like. So when we're talking about self-reflection, which is the first step, again, this is part of that preparation work. This is part of getting ready so that when you walk into the conversation, you have some talking points prepared. So you want to get clear on the boundaries that you need. So this is where you want to reflect on things like, where do you feel ongoing resentment, or where do you feel ongoing frustration? Where do you feel that your needs aren't being met, or that people are taking advantage of you, or you're not being respected, or you're exhausted all the time? or you're not able to perform at your best. So these are all some things you might want to consider when thinking about where you might need some boundaries. So you want to get clear on that, because the more clear you can get on that, the more specific you're going to be in setting the boundaries that you need, which is going to help with the communication piece. Now, once you know the boundaries that you need, the next step is to get really, really clear on what is making you uncomfortable or what needs to change. Because again, that's going to come up in the process of actually communicating that with the person that you're setting boundaries with. So that could be around, specific situations or behaviors or actions or how you're treated or how you're talked to or whatever it is. So you want to get very, very clear on what's not working, which is what's driving you to want to set this boundary, because it's something that you need in your life for your well-being. Now, the next piece of preparing and planning is to think through when and where you're going to have this conversation. So you want to pick a time when the person that you're going to be having this conversation with is going to be the most open and receptive to hearing your input on this, hearing your thoughts and valuing your contribution and what your needs are. And so if let's say this is a conversation you're going to have with your partner, if they come home from work every day and they're exhausted, then having this conversation right when they get home from work is probably not going to be the best idea. Or if this is a conversation you want to have with a coworker or your boss, and you know that they are usually slammed in the afternoons and they're not really going to be able to give you their full attention, it's probably not the best time to plan that conversation. So you want to really think through when's going to be the best time where the person you're talking to is going to be the most receptive and open. But you also want to think through when is going to be the best time where you are going to have the uninterrupted time. You're going to have enough time to fully communicate what your needs are and allow for there to be conversation without being interrupted or distracted, because this isn't really a conversation that you want to table and have to come back to. You want to make sure there's enough time for you to fully be able to express yourself and talk things through and come to a conclusion with the person that you're setting boundaries with. Now, the third step is to actually have the conversation. So You've picked the time, you've picked the place, you're clear on your boundaries, you're clear on the needs, you're clear on the scenarios, and you're ready to go. And so when you are meeting with this person to start to express and communicate your boundaries, you really want to use I statements. And this is because if you use you as opposed to I, it can inadvertently make people feel like they're being accused of something, which is immediately going to put them on the defense. And they're going to shut down from hearing what you have to say. And they're not going to be focused on you anymore. They're going to be focused on themselves and feeling like they need to defend themselves. So an example is like saying something like, I feel uncomfortable when you, or when, not even when you, but I feel uncomfortable when whatever, versus you make me uncomfortable when you do whatever. So if you think about those for a minute, both of those have very different energy. And if you're on the receiving end of that, I bet if you're getting well, you make me uncomfortable when you blah, 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 you're immediately going to feel attacked and go on the defense, right? So you want to make sure that you anchor your statements from your perspective by using that I statement. You also want to make sure that you're direct and you're assertive. You don't want to be apologizing for these. You do not need to apologize for setting boundaries to protect your needs and your well-being. So you want to make sure that you're not doing that. And again, you want to be, when it comes to being direct, you want to use like I need or I expect. So you might want to say things like, I need you to respect my personal space. Or, I expect for you to support me in having some alone time to recharge when I am exhausted and drained after a long week or something like that. So hopefully that makes sense, but you also want to provide specific examples. So this will come in from the preparation piece. You want to provide some specific examples because this is just going to help people understand what you're talking about. They're going to be able to anchor into, what you're referring to or where this may be coming from. It's also going to help them understand, and it's also going to help avoid misunderstandings on what it is that you're asking for. And finally, you want to use active listening. Now, again, introverts are great at listening. So you really want to lean into this when you're having these conversations, because the goal here is not to say, okay, this is what I need, we're done, conversation over. The goal is to have an open conversation, because in some cases, you setting a boundary may violate one of their boundaries. So if that's the case, you've got to have open conversation so that you can meet on a middle ground so that you both feel like your boundaries are being respected. So, but with that said, just because somebody doesn't like your boundary or doesn't want this boundary to be set does not mean that you have to forego it or not use your boundary. It's just an opportunity to start a conversation, but also to stand your ground as long as you're not in turn violating one of their boundaries. And now the fourth step is setting consequences. Now, this may not be something that you want to do in the initial conversation, but you do need to prepare and have parameters in place if and when somebody ignores or violates your boundaries. And you may want to think through like whether they do it once, because we're human and sometimes we make mistakes, or whether it's somebody who's doing it repeatedly, because that's going to generate different responses. But you do need to have that prepared, because if people violate your boundaries and you don't stand up for them, then you effectively don't have boundaries. So it's super, super important that you have that plan in place. Now, after you have these conversations, take a moment to congratulate yourself, because that's hard work. It's not easy to speak up for yourself, especially if you've never really done that before. So you're going to feel uncomfortable, most likely. So be kind to yourself and balance these conversations out with some time for self-care. So whether it's some alone time to rest, recharge, relax, maybe it's journaling, going to meet up with a best friend, or doing something that brings you joy, but make sure you balance those conversations out with that, because that's going to allow you to stay firm in what you need and not get caught in the mind drama of, oh my gosh, why did I have that conversation? Oh my gosh, what are they thinking? I've upset them. So if you can balance it out with self-care, you're going to stay grounded and anchored and rooted in your needs and in your self-worth for speaking up for your needs. Because remember, boundaries are not mean. They are not selfish. They're essential for your overall health and well-being. And boundaries, when you learn to communicate boundaries within a relationship, this is the key to having open communication. It is the key to healthy, respectful, loving relationships. So it's not only going to help with conversations around boundaries, but if you can really learn how to do this and do this well, it's going to help open up the relationship to stronger communication across the board. So it's such a wonderful skill to learn and to implement into your relationships. So just to recap, because we're getting almost up on time, today I talked about, to wrap up this 3-part series, I talked about why effective communication is essential and crucial for setting boundaries. I talked about a couple of tips for how to start to build your assertiveness and confidence in having these conversations and preparing for these conversations. And then I shared 4 steps that you can take to prepare for the conversations, have the conversations, and then actually heal from the, not heal, but balance the energy on the back end of having the conversations. So if this is something that you struggle with, like if setting boundaries is something that you know you need and you really struggle with this is something that I can help you with, because this is something I love to work on with my clients. It's kind of one of my jams that I love to do with my clients. And I do have a 3-call introductory program called Quiet Courage, and focusing this program specifically on working on your boundaries is like a perfect fit, because over these 3 calls, I can help you get really, really clear on the boundaries that you need in your life. I can help you do that prep work so that you're gathering all the information that you need to feel really confident walking into those conversations. I can help you come up with what exactly you need to say in those conversations. We even do some role playing so that that's not the first time those words are coming out of your mouth. And then I help you with anything that comes up around the idea of having those conversations, or if you do have some, what comes from that. So this is it's such an amazing container for this, because we can get really, really laser focused on it. So within like the next month, you can start to lay this really solid foundation for some positive improvements in your life. So maybe you're wanting to reclaim your energy so that you don't always feel exhausted and overextended. Or maybe you're wanting to find more or to be more focused and productive at work so that you can actually contribute at a higher level so that you get recognized for the value that you bring to the table. Or maybe it's about the whole communication in your relationships. Maybe you really want to work on strengthening your communication so that you are feeling seen, valued, respected, and loved, and your needs are being met and valued. So if this is something that you would like to take advantage of, again, it's 60-minute coaching calls, $333. Then I would love for you to grab one of these spots. I'm going to drop the link in the chat just so that you can grab it if that's something that you want to do. I have a few spots open coming up for July, so you can get on my calendar and we can get those boundaries in place for you so that, again, you can feel more energized, loved, seen, respected, and all of the things that you need in your life. All right, so as I said, this wraps up this 3-part series. Next week, instead of kicking off another LinkedIn Live series, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be doing an encore of a webinar that I did back in, well, a couple of months ago called Unlock Your Introvert Magic. It was very well received. It was a great time, and it is it's really like a introduction to what makes you awesome as an introvert. So if you are new to learning about being an introvert, if you struggle to feel like there are any advantages to being an introvert, then this is going to be for you. It's going to be a 60-minute webinar on Zoom, and I'm going to be talking about the unique strengths of introverts that you may currently be seeing as limitations. So I'll go deeper into that than I did today. I'm going to be talking about how you've been conditioned over time to believe that introversion is something that needs to be fixed, which is so not true, but understanding that is going to help you to decouple from that so that you no longer believe that. And then I'm also going to be giving you some actionable tips that you can take on a daily basis to counteract the anxiety that a lot of introverts feel with the pressure to be more talkative, to show up more, to be more visible, to just be more and more and more and more, which causes a lot of stress for us. So I'm going to give you some actionable tips on that to help manage that. So this is going to be next Thursday. It's going to be a little bit earlier in the day. So be on the lookout for that invite. Even though it's going to be on Zoom, I am going to be setting up an invite on LinkedIn for that so that you can, you can register for it. It's a free webinar. And if you can't make it live, there will be a replay that will be sent out. So I hope to see you there. I'm also going to drop a link for that so you can register for that if that is something that you want to attend. All right, and with that said, if there is any questions, then I would love to hear them and help and answer those questions for you. So we've got a few more minutes left, although I am happy to go over if there is any questions that you'd like answered. So with that in mind, I'll give you a minute or two. All right. Not seeing any questions come in, that is perfectly fine. So in that case, I'm going to wrap things up. But if any questions come up, whether it's about boundaries, whether it's about the Quiet Courage program, about the webinar next week, about introversion in general, whatever, I love to answer questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out to me. You can either leave a comment on this event. You can reach out to me in DMs if it's not something you want to share on a public platform. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And for those that decide to join me with Quiet Courage to work specifically on your boundaries, I cannot wait to work with you. I can't wait to help you unlock that and to really put some parameters in place that not only are going to help you feel more energized, seen, loved, and all of that stuff, but is also going to help you become a better communicator and advocate for yourself. So can't wait to work with you. So thank you very much. Thank you for being here. And I will see you next week for the Unlock Your Introvert Magic webinar.